Burmese pythons, cane toads, alligators, they're all loose, they're all invasive, and it's all your fault. We must ban these animals. Well, actually, none of this is true, and I'll tell you why. Today, we're talking about why the invasive species in South Florida and around the world aren't exactly there for the reason that they want you to believe. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Reptiles. Stick around. Okay, I don't want to sound like a crazy person, so what I mean by they is a royal they. I'm talking about government agencies that want to ban pet ownership of certain species or altogether. I'm talking about PETA, who are, these people are probably more cruel to animals than anyone you've ever met, just a disgusting organization. FWC, which goes around killing animals with nail guns, including ones that are completely legal, just also terrible organization.
It was a mistake.
How I reminded you 10 times!
That is who I'm talking about, not the Illuminati or something crazy. And what they want you to think is all the invasive animals, not just, I know we're going to talk a lot about Florida and the southern US because most of my audience is there, but even places like North Carolina or Australia is a great example too. They want you to think that, well, it's because people just get pets and don't want them and then therefore put them in the environment. And the only way that we can do anything about this is to get rid of these animals and make it illegal for us to own them, which is baloney for so many reasons, and we're going to discuss why. First of all, a lot of these animals are invasive by transport, complete accident. For example, blind snakes. Blind snakes are these tiny little snakes that look like worms, more or less. I guarantee you've probably, well, I can't guarantee, but you might have seen one if you dig around in the dirt, basically anywhere in the world that you are. They're everywhere. They're up here in Canada, they're in the US, they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're in Africa, they're everywhere. And these snakes, a lot of the times, get transported in soil. So, for example, and I'll use a few different examples of species, I used to work at a plant and flower distributor, right? For most of my 20s, I was a sales rep for a place that sold flowers to businesses, grocery stores, flower shops, garden centers, stuff like that. So I would get in potted plants from Florida that were transported up here to Canada, and they'd be distributed around Canada or sometimes back to the US. A lot of the time, I would see, oh, well, we got eggs, and it'd be, I don't know, a Knowles, or one time we saw a pygmy rattlesnake in a box of leather leaf. So this is what leather leaf is. So this ferny looking stuff came 25 bunches to a box. It comes refrigerated, and there's a pygmy rattlesnake in one of these bunches, which is obviously very dangerous. It was too cold to do anything. But either the point of this whole thing is a lot of the time through transport, and this can happen on ships, in containers, not just potted plants, on all sorts of products, the animals get transported accidentally. So a knoll goes into a greenhouse, gets into the substrate, and then gets shipped. This happens with frogs all the time too. I've seen so many frogs come in on banana plants, birds of paradise, big leaf plants like that, and you look in the spiral and there's a tree frog, right? This happens all the time. This is another reason why Cuban tree frogs are taking over Florida. It wasn't somebody's pet, it came in on transports. Next, let's talk about the big one, Burmese pythons in Florida. No, this is not because people released their pets. This is ridiculous. Do you know how many people would have had to release their freaking pets for how long ago in order for them to reproduce at the rate they are now? What actually happened was there was a hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane in August of 1992 called Hurricane Andrew, and it destroyed 63,000 homes. And one of the buildings that it destroyed was a breeding facility for large snakes. Now, this wasn't the only one. There was exotic cats, there was a whole bunch of exotic animals all over the freaking place in Florida during this time period. But just for perspective, I was born in 1991. This means that this happened when I was a wee baby, okay? We're talking almost 32 years ago this event happened. If a Burmese python, females, take about 3 years to reach sexual maturity, that means that we've had 10.66 cycles, which means that if you started off with an estimated 300 to 3,000 pythons, which I can't get an accurate number, but let's call it 1,000, okay? So you have 1,000. Of these pythons, let's say 500 are female. It's probably more, because if you have a breeding facility, you have usually, 8 or 9 females to every male. But let's be generous here and say it's 500, okay? So you have 500 females, and then of those 500, each one of them, say, have 10 eggs. Obviously, Burmese pythons can have upward of 70 or 80, but let's call it 10. So now we're at 5,000 eggs. Let's suppose that half of them hatch, okay? So 2,500. Let's suppose that, I don't know, 10% of those live. So 250. So we've increased the population by quite a bit, by a quarter in one generation. Now, of course, the next generation isn't just that simple math. Now you've got that many more snakes. The point is, if you do the math, we're talking about millions and millions of snakes over the course of 10 generations. No, I'm not a mathematician. I probably explained that clunkily, but the math does work. The point is, it took a giant, massive event, once in a lifetime event, for this to happen. If a bunch of people just slowly, every once in a while, release their pets, if it's something like cats, which we'll get to in a second, that's different. But if it's snakes that haven't really been popular for very long, we're talking about this is only 32 years ago, okay? So these animals have had very little time in the wild, and there was a ton of them that were let go. To have 3,000 of those animals released by families would take hundreds of years. This is just not something that's happening, especially considering the price of these animals. So something like a cat, for example, will jump from South Florida to Australia. Australia has an invasive cat population that they're actually doing something about. By the way, by far, without a close second, cats are the most destructive animal on the planet. These things kill birds, they kill rodents, they kill everything. If you're a person who leaves your cat outside, you are part of the freaking problem, okay? Cats are inside animals, they're invasive, they're feral, this catch and release stuff is baloney. In Australia, they've got it right. You know what they do with cats? They kill them, just like we do with iguanas, just like we do with Burmese pythons. The only reason we don't do it with cats is because they're cute and cuddly in its optics. In Australia, they're like, no, mate, I know that sounds terrible. You get the point. They will put arrows through these things and then hold them up on hunting magazines because Australia freaking gets it. And then the one everyone knows about, cane toads, which were introduced to get rid of beetles on sugarcane. The problem is they realized very quickly, it was 4,200 cane toads, by the way. So 4,200 cane toads in 1935, if I remember right. And these toads, they jump this high, and the beetles like to be this high. So it didn't work at all. And these cane toads didn't have natural predators. Therefore, they just expanded, boomed, and now they're an issue. And that's basically what happens. A lot of the times, it's issues with government bringing them in, or rich people back in the day bringing them in for their own enjoyment, hunting, whatever the case is. But unless it's something like cats, where for thousands of years, people have had cats as pets, or let's say hundreds of years to be generous, and those cats can reproduce very quickly and tons of babies at a time, and they can live in every environment, well, of course, then you're going to have an issue, because then those animals are being let outside. Nobody is letting their pet Burmese python wander the neighborhood and come back when they're hungry. Nobody does that. Nobody's doing that with tegus. Nobody's doing that. You name the invasive species. So this whole idea that people are, oh, well, it's because little Sally got a pet iguana for Christmas and then let it go. Like, no, that's not how this freaking happens, okay? These are major events that happen that cause a boom. If it was just a little trickle, these animals would die out faster than they can find mates. It's just not a thing that happens. Especially when we talk about in the Carolinas, they're banning tegus. Doc, no. First winter, boom, all dead. All dead. Just like in, places like Saskatchewan where they don't allow you to have certain pythons and boas that would be of no harm to humans. Well, it must be because of invasiveness, right? Well, Saskatchewan is a desolate winter desert for most of the year. And not only that, but owners that are not the most responsible probably aren't taking heed of laws anyway. All you're doing is driving down the market into the black market. That's it. It doesn't mean that you can't go get an iguana in Florida. That's not a thing. And then, of course, I've literally heard this. So FWC a lot of the time will allow people to call in and be heard. And by be heard, they're doing it for optics. They don't actually listen to what you're saying before they pass laws, white lists, or whatever other laws. And I've literally heard these officials talk about alligators in the sewers as if it's a real thing. No. There's no Ninja Turtles partying it up with crocodiles in the sewers. It's not a freaking thing, okay? That is not a thing. If you flush a baby alligator, and this was a big thing in like the 90s, 80s probably too. I was a kid in the 90s, and I think it was like Popular Mechanics for Kids or whatever, and they did myths, and this was one of the myths, and then I just became obsessed with it because I liked animals and reptiles back then. But either way, yeah, that's not a thing. Like, sure, is it possible that people releasing pets over an extended period of time can affect the ecosystem? Absolutely, it sure can. Is banning stuff ever going to fix this? Not a freaking chance. Zero chance. Instead, education, put some sort of, I don't know, not red tape, but yeah, red tape, right? This isn't a constitutional right. It's a privilege to have these animals. I agree. But at the same time, just taking them away, oh, I know that you have a business that does tegus and Burmese pythons, but we're just shutting it down. Like, this is ridiculous. There is responsible pet ownership. So what, are we not allowed to have cats? Until we start putting regulation on cats, I don't believe you actually care about the environment at all. Cats do way more damage than any Burmese python. One cat does more damage than any Burmese python has ever done, ever in the history of everdom, ever. This is ridiculous. It's optics. It's controlling you. That's all it is. That's all it is. Put a ban on cats or some sort of regulation on cats, and then I'll believe you give 1% of a care about the ecosystem. Until then, you're trying to control us, and that's it. Do you like videos like this? Should we do more ranty? I didn't mean to make this ranty, but it was. Let me know in the comment section below. As always, thanks for hitting like and subscribe. Appreciate you guys. You're amazing. And amazing, let's talk about Patreon. The Patreon supporters get videos early, discounts on merch, you get one-on-one conversations with me, all that and more for as little as $1 a month. And that's it, because I do videos twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. That means I'll see you in the next one.